Well, hello. Good afternoon, both to Scott Baker and to Elana Weinstein here.
It is Thursday, August 28th. We're live on Lead Better here, and we're talking about micro goals that get projects and people back on track. Now, this is a fairly straightforward topic, and yet I had a couple of complicated questions, and I was fairly certain that Mikey and I are not sophisticated enough to actually figure it out. So bringing in Elana was obviously a brilliant decision.
It's a no-brainer. And for the first time, you're not presenting this as it was an intervention for me. We've had several guests.
Sorry, we've had, yes, right. Yeah, I don't know that this is particularly one of your problems, but Elana, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Scott?
Dynamite. So, I mean, do you agree that the idea that, we should take a complicated thing and break it down into smaller steps? That sounds pretty simple, right?
Totally. Completely agree.
Yeah. So where does this fall apart, though? Like, as you coach leaders and see organizations, and you'd be like, well, clearly we would just make this into smaller steps. And if everybody did that, then the world would just be running perfectly, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a great question. Where does it fall apart? Because I wholeheartedly buy into the step-by-step for a couple of reasons and that are very personal to me. I think I'll just give you the example that came into my head immediately when I thought about this topic, which is that I'm a native New Yorker and I have completed the New York City Marathon twice. And I say completed because I, never thought literally that I could run a marathon. It was one of these things where, cheered on the sidelines.
So what was the
years.
Micro step? What was it? Was it a mile at a time, or what? How did you do it?
You got it. So the micro step was, I entered the lottery. It turned out I got a spot, which is ridiculous and unheard of in the lottery. And then I said, wow, I have to come up with a training plan. I've got to do this. I have a lottery spot.
How far before your lottery spot and the actual date of the marathon?
Oh, the lottery spot came through in February and the marathon was in November.
Okay.
So I then,
for those that have a base of running, that's about the time that the marathon training program begins.
Yeah.
Did you have a base of running underneath yourself at that point?
I did. I've been a runner. I had a base of running, but I'd never completed or done a marathon. Right. And so I thought, how am I going to go about this and preserve my joints? Right? Like, I'm not 22. So I researched different training plans, and the one that I landed on was a week-by-week training plan. But the first week was basically like, run a mile on Tuesday, run 2 miles on Thursday, and run 3 miles on Sunday. I mean, it was very step by step. And I thought, I can do that. I can definitely go out and run a mile, and I can then run 2 miles, no problem. And it gradually built up, obviously, in distance and so forth. But it worked. And it was really breaking it down step by step. And
now, did you choose a training program that was just based on for beginners, or did you choose something that said for those who want to run a sub 4.5 hour, right?
Right. Well, it was actually a plan that was available for all of those goals. Like if you wanted to do it sub 4, you could adapt it for sub 4. If you wanted to do it as a walk run, you could do it as a walk run. So it provided a lot of accessible options.
Right.
And just to answer Scott's question for a second, where I think it could fall down is the consistency and stick-to-itiveness, right? In other words, it's a matter of really developing that routine, developing the commitment to pursue it, and then acting on it and not falling off. Yeah.
Well, I think the important lesson is that I think you've opened a window here for me to actually make fun of Mikey, which is the important part. Because now I don't think you didn't you do a half marathon, Mikey?
No, it was a full marathon.
When was it?
This was 9 years ago now.
9 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So, but only one.
I was never going to do it again. It was a part-time job trying to get to the point where I'm
getting ready. Yep.
My brother's a track coach, and so he gave me a good expectation of the amount of work that it was going to be. It was a lot. It was a tremendous amount of work. I foolishly chose this sub 3:30 marathon time.
Yes, right.
Not realizing the amount of work that it would do. And I was 2 minutes off of that goal. But to your point, Elana, it was amazing to me, having not trained for anything ever before. I had a base of running where my brother thought it was reasonable for me to choose this 3:30 sub time. Yeah. And I thought, there's no way that this is going to work, because you look at the training program, which is a day by day. You don't think about anything. Day of, just do this step, right?
Yeah.
And I followed it to the T all the way down, but thought, there's no way this is going to work, right? Because nowhere in the training program are you ever running a full marathon.
Yeah, right.
And so it was a huge surprise to me. It was like, how am I going to get myself up for this? And I had never done it before. The idea that I'm going to run faster and longer than I ever have in my life on this one day, like, how in the world can I do this? And I've never come close to any. I think the longest run I ever did in that training program was 18 miles.
Yes, right? Same.
Yeah. So you're showing up for a 23-mile race on the first time you've ever done it, thinking, I'm going to run 4 more miles at a faster pace than I've ever done. There's no way. And I was spent, but the program was exactly right. Like, there was real science that went into it. And I wouldn't have thought the micro goals would have added up to the overall goal the way that it did.
But they did.
It sure did.
All right. Well, here's my complicated question, which is, great. If you take a mile at a time, you're going to get to the end of the marathon. Now, the field note is sort of about how you do this for other people, right? How you, like, they're stuck. And so you're going to come in as the leader and say, well, here's what I want you to focus on. We're going to break these into micro goals. And again, fair enough. If you were like, rather than think that we have to tackle this huge project, let's have some smaller steps. Let's get some short wins. Let's get some momentum going. All the research, all the literature, that it all points in that direction. So my question, because Elana, you've worked with lots of leaders and organizations, do you tell them that's what you're doing? Or do you just kind of just not state it out loud and just say, here's what we're going to work on, that we're going to tell them where you're going, and then you just start doing this. But I don't think you come in as leader and say, you guys are really screwing this up. So we're going to break it down into really, really super simple tasks so that you guys don't look stupid. That wouldn't be the way to do this, right?
I need to start teaching you like kindergartners.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah. Well, I think it is a compromise, Scott. Like, I think it's a little bit of both in terms of what you're saying. In other words, I've worked with leaders where they tell their teams what the micro goals are and what they look like, but not necessarily the second half of what you said, which is, because you guys are really screwing it up, right? So it's like, this is the big, hairy, audacious goal. And these are the milestones that we're going to use to get to that big, hairy, audacious goal.
Right.
And or these are the key measurements. And we are going to check in we're going to do a review on a quarterly basis to see how we're doing against these milestones. And we're going to give it a green, yellow, red, rating in terms of how we're doing. Yeah. Or,
by the way, the green, yellow, red thing might sound, people are like, it kind of sounds a little too simple. Look, I think that's how Alan Mulally turned around Ford and everything. It still works. The green, yellow, red is not a bad way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because there's obviously the visual component, but it also, just for instance, that quarterly cadence really requires people to step back, reflect, measure, right, and realize, okay, this is how we're doing against the goal. So I think it works in both of those ways.
Now, is the value not only in how you're doing it, but maybe for the leader, it's that you can actually see where they're stuck. Like, maybe the team themselves or that individual, they've been chipping away at something and they can't see where they're stuck to even see where that micro step is.
Exactly. And that's where the leader has the coaching conversation, right? Yeah. With either the individual team member or with the team as a whole, and opens up that questioning. Okay, it looks like we're getting stuck on this aspect. What do you need? What additional resources do you need? What would be useful to get us over this hurdle? And starts to use that inquiry to get underneath what's blocking them.
If you do this at first, does it feel a little bit like it's micromanagement? Maybe the title of the field note is like, for the purpose of getting people back on track. Like you've not made it. So we're reserving this tactic for when it's clear that we're not meeting the goal. Because if you do this up front, maybe you're getting into the idea of telling people how to do it, which as good leaders, we want to avoid that. We want your imagination and your ability to think through this thing to come out. I'm just going to tell you what the goal is. You go and do it. But if they're not meeting that, that's when we use this tactic, and only then.
Yeah. And I think the key there is it's the admired leadership behavior of get others to talk first.
Yes, right. Get their language on the table.
Get their language on the table. So from your standpoint, how do you think this work is going? How do you think we're doing against this particular milestone? What's your sense of how it's progressing, and getting them to talk first about it? Because you may be coming in gangbusters with your opinion of, oh, this isn't at all meeting the expectation that I was looking for.
I'd like to throw one question out to commenters who are watching. Like, when it comes to like your own personal coaching of yourself, and oftentimes this might come up inside of New Year's resolutions, right? How is it that you've recognized? And so I want people to, show up in the comments in Substack to actually say, how is it that you have recognized you're not meeting your goal, and instead of just giving up, is this process of breaking things up into micro goals actually helped for you? By the way, we've had someone in our firm who said to me 4 years ago, when you make these resolutions, don't just make them outcome oriented, make sure that they are process oriented goals as well. And that has completely changed my thinking about the way that I think about not just resolutions, but about goals in general. But I'm interested to hear what the commenters might have to say that as we continue to talk with each other here too.
Yeah. I think the that idea of process and getting that first next step. And I think what I was hearing from Elana in terms of that conversation and getting people's expectations and language, they'll know where they're stuck in some sense. They might not know why or where the next step is, but they'll know they're frustrated. In fact, we had one of our team meetings and I think this is safe to say. One person was saying that they weren't sure. There were some other people in the organization that had, play in this issue. They're like, I don't think they know how hard this is. I don't think they understand why we're so frustrated about it. And so if you're leaning in and say, well, tell me more about that, because obviously if you knew how to solve that, you would solve it, maybe, but you do need the wisdom of somebody that maybe has been around the block a couple of more times. Even at my age, I still look for that. And so you can help at that point. And that's just kind of feeling out where those frustration points are.
Yeah, you absolutely have to. I think as the leader, you want to get it, for lack of a better expression, from the horse's mouth, right? You need to hear where they are feeling stuck or where they are feeling blocked, and first get them to articulate that, and then, as you said, Scott, like either be a thought partner or in a mentorship capacity. Coming up with an idea, suggestion, recommendation, and then collaborating or working together to figure out what that next step is going to be.
So the field note here says, when team members are really lost or stuck, the best leaders avoid the temptation that we might have to point to, more than one micro goal at a time, to say, we're breaking this up into 3 steps. Instead, they kind of say, well, let's just focus on this one. Why is that? Why is it that that's the sign of a good leader, to just do one micro goal at a time instead of lining out 3?
Yeah.
Well, isn't it kind of like the marathon, where it's like, if we say, we're going to run this mile, but 8 miles from now, when you're really suffering, like all of a sudden you're like, whoa, let's just deal with this mile.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a really good book out there by the writer Anne Lamott called Bird by Bird. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's exactly this point. Right. And she shares how when she was younger, her brother was very overwhelmed by an assignment that he had to write about birds. And she has this vivid memory of her dad sitting down with him, and in that moment of overwhelm, right, of I have to do this whole long assignment about birds, this written assignment, saying to him, take it bird by bird.
Yeah.
And, and it's just such a good visual and example of not worrying about from A to Z or what the entire assignment is going to look like at the end, but just taking it piece by piece, because that's all you might be able to do in that moment in order to get to the next bird, so to speak. Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear you reference Anne Lamott.
That's a great way to end a Lead Better episode, I think.
Absolutely. No, Scott always references these people who are sometimes feels like they're out of my reach on consciousness. And so the fact that I know who Anne Lamott is, and I love her to death, and you brought her up, I could never expect Scott to bring Anne Lamott up, but you did. Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Anne Lamott wasn't on the reading list for the high school magician, the teenage magician, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Thank you.